Who sets these things?
Well, it's an international negotiation. The countries of the world came together in Kyoto in 1997 and they agreed to the rules under which this thing's going to operate. And for example, I was talking before about pre-1990 forest. If you've got good quality land that you convert into dairying, it makes sense if you harvest a hectare of forest to convert it into a dairy farm rather than replant trees. But under Kyoto, you actually have to replant the trees in the same spot. And it's not even sufficient to say, look, I don't want to replant trees in the same spot, I want to turn that into a dairy farm, but what I'll offer to do is go and buy some high country land, some cheap land, and plant my trees there. Even that's not allowed. The trees are going to absorb just as much carbon up in the mountains as they are going to down on the flat land, but that's not allowed under the Kyoto rules. Now, the New Zealand government is trying to change that, it's trying to negotiate its way out of that, and if we are successful, well, assuming there is even an agreement, because there may not be an agreement, but let's say that for a moment there is an agreement, the New Zealand government is going to try and change those rules. Our foresters, if they want to convert their land into dairy farms, are able to do so and can offer up an olive branch, if you like, of planting trees on high country land rather than paying that $20,000 a hectare. But it makes no sense whatsoever to say to people, well, you can't plant your trees elsewhere. The farmers say, we sequester carbon into soil. Our grass absorbs carbon and you're penalising farmers by taxing them on their emissions but not giving them any credit for carbon. So there's a lot about the Kyoto Protocol that doesn't make sense. But it answers your question, who sets the rules? It's all of the countries together working out their respective positions.
And who does the maths? Because Pete Hodgson come out and said we're going to be 500 million in credit, and all of a sudden he says no, we'll break even, and then he reverses it. And that mathematics was done in Wellington. Who's doing it?
Okay, well let me just pick up that point, because one of the comments that are often made is we've got to pay. We've got to pay for Kyoto, so we have to have this. Well, what some of you may not be aware is on the current forecasts, we're actually in credit. I know you said that Pete Hodgson, the figures are up and down. Most recent figures published by Nick Smith 3 weeks ago is forecasting that we're about on line to be $450 million in credit. So we won't actually have to pay anything as a country. Now what Nick Smith is saying, the reason that we're $450 million in credit is all of these guys planted trees. And so we need to share the money with them. If it hadn't been for those trees that have been planted, we wouldn't be in credit. So what we're going to do is we're going to allocate $2 billion in credits, and we're going to tax all other New Zealanders. We're going to impose this cost on electricity and petrol and food and get all other New Zealanders to pay for that. And what the ACT Party says is that we believe that New Zealand can still be in credit without an ETS. What we have to do, what the ETS is doing, it is stopping people who have got 1980s forests. Pine trees take about 28 years to grow. And what we have to do is we need to leave the incentive, if you like, in place until the end of 2012. And that incentive is to say to foresters, if you harvest your trees, you must replant them in the same spot, or pay $15,000, $20,000 a hectare. Now we can do that without allocating $1 billion plus of credits to post-1990 foresters. Most of the people who planted trees in the 1990s did it in the first 7 or 8 years of that decade. There were literally like 30, 40,000, even 50, 60,000 hectares planted 91, 92, 93, 94. Dropped off quite quickly after about 1998. And we can easily modify our ETS to leave the incentive there for the pre-1990 guys, if they harvest their trees, to replant them without going and allocating $1.6 billion worth of credits to post-1990 guys who clearly, apart from thinning, if you like, won't be harvesting the trees because their trees are not old enough to harvest. But what ACT does say, if we were to suspend the scheme, there would be some people who would lose. There would be people who went out and planted trees since 2008 on the promise from the government that they'd be getting these credits. So ACT says that if necessary we could pay compensation to those people. And it'd be a much better thing to do than to pay, we think, probably no more than $10 to $20 million in compensation than impose what is really quite a massive cost on our whole economy. So in answer to your question, yes, the credits did go up and down.
The question was, who's doing the arithmetic? NIWA's doing the temperatures.
Yep.
Who's doing the arithmetic for this? Is it Treasury?
Ministry for the Environment.
Ministry for the Environment?
Yep.
So we don't know this. Who name the people that are doing it?
Oh,
Who's responsible? Isn't it?
Well, Nick Smith's the Minister for the Ministry of Environment, so he's nominally the political figure in charge of the Ministry for the Environment. They're doing the figures.
Why aren't they getting out on the road and explaining this to us? We're on the bloody dark here. We don't know what the hell's going on.
Do you mean explain it to forests and farmers in some detail?
Yeah,
Explain it to everyone.
Well, Nick Smith was doing that in Palmerston North this evening. Apparently at 5 o'clock, you were here.
I don't know. I didn't know anything about him.
Yeah,
He would have got a roughen up if I knew he was there.
I understand he did.
I'm surprised.
John.
You did anyway, boy, from several orders.
Did you bring the flies?
We give him a bit of flack, we didn't make it easy for him.
John, you mentioned figures of about $3 a week. We say it's $5 a week. Shouldn't we be stressing to people that this is just the thin end of the wedge? That when you look at the reductions in carbon dioxide that are being promised by the other parties, the sort of costs that they would have to put on to make these come to pass are much more. That it's tens and tens of dollars a week, or even hundreds of dollars. We know from 2008 how much petrol has to go up in order even to get like 8% reduction in driving.
That's a very good point, and I guess that there are two types of answers, and they're opposite to each other. I went along to a conference at Victoria University about 2 months ago, and it was conducted under what they call Chatham House rules. And Chatham House rules means that I'm entitled to tell you what was said, but I simply can't tell you who said it. So I won't tell you who said it, but I will tell you what was said. And it was, if you like, a climate revival rally. And essentially these people said that a 5% increase in electricity is not going to cut it. A 10% increase in electricity is not going to cut it. We've got to have a 40% increase in the price of electricity. In other words, you're getting a 5% increase in the price of electricity at $12.50 a tonne for carbon. $25 a tonne will give you a 10% increase, and we've got to get the price of carbon to $100 a tonne, and we've got to get there as quick as possible. Because only by increasing the price of electricity to 40% will you force the RSA and Palmerston North to find us a smaller room so we can turn out all these lights and put us a little small room, which is what we booked. So only by forcing up the price will people change their behaviour. They said, because if you're only putting up the price of electricity at 5%, 5% is cheap, just leave the lights on. Likewise, people were saying, we don't want gas at $2 a litre, we want it at $3 a litre. Because at $3 a litre, people will actually think about getting hybrid cars and electric cars or catching the bus. And so yes, on one hand, there is a move to get the price of carbon as high as possible to change people's behaviour. The other hand is exactly the opposite. The other hand says that there will be no post-Kyoto agreement, partly because China won't agree, and if China doesn't agree, the United States certainly won't agree, and secondly because we believe the scientific consensus will start to drop away quite significantly, and ClimateGate showed that the credibility of a number of those key scientists was questionable, and as public support drops for this type of thing, that rather than the price of carbon going up, it'll actually drop. So there's two answers.